Hey everybody, John from PSI here with another edition of our FAQ series. Today's question is, hey John, why should I run aftermarket gauges and not my factory gauges? Great question, let's talk about that. So what I have here is I have two sets of Dakota Digital gauges and I have a factory gauge cluster from an OBS Chevy. So you might be asking yourself, why should I spend the money on the Dakota gauges? My factory gauges worked fine. Can I get them to work with my LS or my LT setup? What should I do and what's easiest or what's least expensive? And it really boils down to, what your time is worth. So let's talk about the factory gauge cluster first. And we're gonna use this OBS truck gauge cluster as an example. So obviously this truck had a TBI motor, it's 1990s, 1980s fuel injection technology, and it used a funky kind of connector on the back of it. As we've shown in other videos, there were different types of connectors on the OBS gauge clusters, but this particular one used this type of bayonet style terminal. And we adapted it to use some MetroPack 150 connectors in our application because we're actually testing different types of gauge clusters. But anyway, you're gonna get this connector at the back of your gauge cluster. These wires, obviously, you're gonna go find them in the chassis harness, and then you're gonna have to pin them correctly. Now, if you're running a Gen 3 LS motor, there are outputs for your speedo and tachometer and your check engine light. Same with Gen 4. But in Gen 5, that's not necessarily the case. There's a check engine light wire, but there's no speedo and tachometer outputs. So you kind of run into a dilemma trying to run the factory gauges. Now, when it comes to your oil pressure and your water temp, that's a different story because what you're gonna have to do is you are gonna have to run your factory senders from the TBI motor that was in this case in our OBS truck. You're gonna have to find a spot to use them on the engine. Now that's not a problem, we sell a kit for it, but it is one added expense and one added amount of time and wiring you're gonna have to route in order to use this factory gauge cluster. So now let's move on to Dakota Digital. Now we're a big reseller of Dakota Digital gauges. We've been using them for a long, long time. They constantly are coming out with new innovative designs to make things even look nicer as well as function even better. Now in the case of a OBS setup, or in this case a C10 setup or 55 Chevy setup, they offer different levels of gauges. Some come with different color changing, some come with other types of features, but you're really gonna look at it based on your budget and what kind of features you want. They also have the ability to work off an app on your phone. When it comes to Gen 3 or Gen 4, you can also integrate a BIM module. Okay, and what the BIM module allows you to do is you're gonna basically hook into the OBD2 port and you're gonna run all of the gauge function off of your OBD2 ports. So there's no wiring of sensors. The only sensor you're gonna have to wire power, ground, and your fuel level sender because obviously that's part of your chassis harness. But everything else is gonna be integrated in it. So one of the other advantages of using an aftermarket gauge cluster like Dakota Digital is they're gonna give you a lot of other functionality. Since we are getting information over the CAN bus on the BIM module, you can get transmission temperature, you can get different types of pressures. They even have a quarter mile, almost like a G-force type setup in there where you can actually time your quarter mile from the truck or the car. But it's limitless, all of the different types of items that they'll allow you to display on their gauge clusters compared to being pigeonholed by the factory gauge cluster. So let me know in the comments what you think, and remember to wire it up and fire it up.